There's something you do in silence, something subtle and almost invisible, that shapes how people see you before you even say a word. And the strange part is that most people never realize this is happening. It's not about what you say or how loudly you say it, but something deeper, something that starts before any conversation begins. And when I understood this, it completely changed the way I saw myself. But if it's not what we say, then what exactly is it? There are days when I walk into a place and I feel completely invisible, not because something bad happened or because someone treated me differently, but because there's this quiet feeling inside me like I don't fully belong there, like I'm present physically, but not really existing in that space in a meaningful way. And what makes this even more confusing is that this feeling doesn't always happen. So it changes, because on other days in very similar environments, sometimes even the exact same place, with the same type of people, nothing on the outside really changes, but somehow I feel different, more present, more grounded, and even without saying anything, it feels like people notice me. So if the environment is the same, why does the experience feel completely different? That contrast started to bother me more than I expected, because if I wasn't doing anything dramatically different, if I wasn't speaking more or acting in a completely new way, then what exactly was creating that shift in how I was being perceived? What was I doing without realizing it? One day I stopped trying to understand myself for a moment and just started observing, and that's when I noticed someone entering the same space, someone who wasn't trying to stand out, wasn't exaggerated in any way, but still managed to draw attention naturally. And the strangest part was not that people noticed, but how they noticed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forced, and it didn't interrupt anything, it just happened. And that's when an uncomfortable thought came to me. Maybe the problem was never what I said, maybe it started much earlier than that. But if it starts before words, where does it actually begin? When I started paying attention to myself, it became hard to ignore the small details. The way I walked into places slightly rushed, my eyes avoiding connection, my posture a bit closed, as if I was unconsciously asking for permission just to exist there. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. That's when I realized that communication doesn't begin with words, it begins in the body, in the rhythm of your movements, in the way you take up space or avoid it, and people perceive that long before you say anything. But what does that actually look like in practice? The best way I can explain it is with something simple, like water. Because when water is agitated, nothing reflects clearly and everything feels unstable. But when it's calm, everything becomes visible. And in a similar way, people respond to that internal state even if they don't understand it consciously. So what was happening inside me all that time? I realized that most of the time I wasn't calm at all, even in silence, because internally I was always trying to seem more confident, more interesting, more prepared, and the more I tried, the more unnatural everything felt. And that led me to something I didn't expect. The people who naturally draw attention are not trying to do that. They're not rushing to fill silence. They're not constantly proving themselves. They're simply comfortable, even when nothing is happening. And that raises a different question. Where does that kind of comfort come from? That's when I understood that confidence isn't something you show, it's something you build in small moments when no one is watching, when you keep promises to yourself or break them. And over time, those moments shape how you feel about yourself. So, what happens when you start changing those small moments? Instead of trying to fix everything at once, I started small, slowing down, holding eye contact longer, allowing myself to exist without rushing. And even though it felt unnatural at first, something began to shift gradually. But the biggest change didn't come from feeling ready. I realized that confidence doesn't come before action, it comes after, because you act first even without feeling ready. And through that, you start building trust in yourself, little by little, consistently. And once that trust starts to grow, everything else changes. Today I still feel insecure sometimes, but it doesn't control me the same way anymore. Because now there is something underneath, something more stable. And maybe the real question isn't how to look confident, but what you are doing with yourself when no one is watching, because in the end, presence doesn't begin when you speak, it arrives before that. And maybe the only thing left to ask is, what are you showing about yourself without saying a single word?